can also give me some time to myself because I don't want to speak too much. But okay, thanks for being here. Welcome everybody. I'm so happy to be able to share with you the culmination of my thesis that I gave the title of Urban Mobility and Accessibility Dynamics. And to start, I would like to ask you if have you ever wondered why we find ourselves driving more and walking less? Is it because we like it, or is it because we have to? So this is one of the questions that made me interested in the topic of mobility and accessibility. And it's because I observed that nowadays we are facing rapid urbanization processes all around the world, and this has increased our travel demands. And usually we cover these travel demands by using more the car, which has created highly car-oriented environments. When this happens, we have uneven development of transport infrastructure, and this gives us limited transportation alternatives, which can generate exclusion among people. So when this happens, transport planners and decision makers often ask this question of which transport project is better. Is it better to construct a new metro line? Is it better to construct a new bridge for cars? So to answer to these questions, usually they use evaluation methods to see which alternative is better. But the truth is that these evaluation techniques are based a lot on economic rationalism, such as cost-benefit analysis, and they are no longer suitable for societies that are so complex like our society. And they also want to answer to the question of then, what is the objective of transportation systems? Is it just to provide mobility in a cost-effective way, or is it also to provide accessibility? Then it is important to say that these two concepts are related, but they are not the same, because mobility refers only to the ability to move from one point to another, but accessibility refers to the ability to do it and also how easy it is for people to do it. Observing this, I saw that it was needed to study the social and the spatial distribution of the effects of different transport interventions. And I chose to focus on a case study from Mexico, a city called Aguascalientes, because it is a fast-growing city that has experienced changes in their infrastructure, and it recently had a car-oriented project that was based on economic maximization. This project was called the continuous flow. With this in mind, the research aim is to investigate how a car-oriented transport intervention influences urban mobility and accessibility dynamics. I have two objectives. The first one is related to mobility, and it is to identify the changes in inhabitants' mobility patterns and also the costs and benefits that they experience in the environment. And then in relation to accessibility, I want to see how accessibility changes through the time in the space, but also among socioeconomic groups. In this sense, it will be seen that if accessibility improves, then this could be seen as a benefit, but if it decreases, this could be seen as a cost. And to give more context about the project intervention, this is the continuous flow that was implemented between 2017 and 2022, where the aim was to construct 11 bridges and underpasses along the second ring that will remove all these barriers to allow people and cars, well, mainly cars, to travel faster, and in consequence they will reduce operating costs, such as the consumption of fuel, but also it will create greater comfort, lower pollution, that is what they say, based on a cost-benefit analysis. But in this analysis, they forgot to mention other alternatives that were not car-oriented, and also they didn't mention what will happen to other people who will not move in this mode, in car, and also how this transportation system change will be distributed among people. So the methodology that I follow combines two approaches. First, I do a descriptive analysis, and I combine it with an accessibility analysis to leisure facilities. For this specific accessibility analysis, I chose to model two scenarios, one before the intervention and one after the intervention. And for the one after the intervention, I assumed that speeds were increased, that there were more barriers for people when they wanted to walk, and that there were also changes in the behavior of people. I used primary data and also secondary data, and I would like to say that for primary data, I made some field work, and I gathered 364 surveys that gather information about transport patterns in Aguascalientes. So here, as you can see, this is the study site. I work with HEP units that are these little polygons, and I chose leisure facilities that are shopping malls, cinemas, museums, and parks. So I want to see how easy it is for people to access to these places. So to start discussing the results, I would like to mention that overall, combining these two approaches, I found that indeed there are more costs and more benefits than the ones that were stated in the cost-benefit analysis. If we look first at the changes in mobility patterns, we can see that there is an increase in the people who always chooses to drive a car. And there is a reduction in the people who there is an increase, in the number of people who never chooses to walk. Then when I saw that, I wanted to know what are the reasons why people are driving so much. And they mentioned that comfort, efficiency, safety were among those reasons. And I also saw, okay, what will happen then if they are driving so much? And 56% of them strongly agreed that they have seen an increase in traffic congestion. There are other benefits that will be perceived among people, such as reductions in time, money, more access to recreation, but the ones that I observe with more frequency are money reductions, access to recreation, and more car infrastructure. If we look at the socioeconomic groups, we see that the middle income group is the one that tends to benefit the most. And I also wanted to see what happened with the infrastructure in this period of time. And if we look at the color scale, we can see that car infrastructure is more present compared to the pedestrian infrastructure. This is according to the perception of citizens. And I also wanted to know how people are traveling now in comparison to the past when they want to reach leisure destinations. I saw that there is people who only chooses to move in their neighborhood, and this number of people reduced. And there's people who chooses to travel anywhere in the city to reach their preferred facility, and this number of people increased. In terms of accessibility, first I want to introduce you to the impedance functions that I modeled, and to understand what are these impedance functions, they basically tell us what are the probabilities of making a trip given the travel cost that in this case are measured in time. So here we can see that before there was a higher likelihood of making shorter trips by foot and longer trips by car. But in the present, this trend changes and now it is the opposite. We use this impedance function to calculate the overall accessibility, and here we can see that people can experience very low levels of accessibility. That means maybe they reach 10 or 15 leisure destinations, or they can have a very high accessibility level. Here we see that all the cities basically in blue. This indicates that there was an overestimation of the model that has to do with the difficulty of building the model and including impedances, such as the traffic congestion, or for instance, the traffic lights. But then we can assume that if there are no cars, for instance at 3 in the morning, then people will travel without impedances and have very high accessibility. However, for the after intervention, this reduced a little bit and it went to 97%. Then, when we look at what happens with the accessibility to leisure destinations for people who travels by foot, we see a different picture, because people here can experience from very low levels of accessibility to very high. And we see that those who experience very high accessibility are concentrated mainly in the city center. Here we see that there is a reduction of the people who experience very low accessibility. But then, is this because the environment changed, or is it just because people are forced to walk longer distances? I would like to stress also that accessibility is determined not only by the space, but also by the characteristics of the person who is making the trip. Then it becomes important to see variables that are like income or education. And here I observe that for those people who have very high accessibility by car, 39% of them have very low income, which means that maybe they will not have the resources to buy a car. And also the census data indicates that 26% of the households already report that they don't have a car. Also, for people who have very low accessibility by foot, 33% of them don't have enough resources to maybe access other transport modes. So for me, the discussion can be divided into three parts. First, in the mobility, we see that people are driving more, but the distances that they are driving are shorter. Is this good? And also people are walking less, but when they walk, they have to walk for longer distances. We also observe that the middle income group benefits the most, and also that increased mobility happened in this period of time. That may be seen as a benefit, but maybe it can also generate social costs. And then in terms of accessibility, we saw that car accessibility slightly reduced from one point to another, and that is spread around the city, and that is generally very high. Whereas for walking, we saw that this increased from the past to the present, and that is mainly concentrated, speaking in spatial terms, and that it also tends to be very low. In the methodology, we saw an overestimation that has to do with the difficulty to build the model and include the impedances, but that it also had low sensitivity to the changes that I made in the network. And also that maybe these changes would have been observed if the spatial unit was smaller. So I would like to conclude bringing two implications. The first one is theoretical, and I think that more research is needed to understand the travel choices of people. There are different factors that influence why people choose one mode over the other, but here comparing car versus walking, we saw that in Aguascalientes, a very car-oriented city, people now are driving shorter distances. Why? And then for policy, I can say that accessibility is not considered a review element in urban projects, at least now. And this brings me the question, is it because of awareness, understanding, or is it just a prioritization of policymakers? I think that if we bring this topic to the table, this can be even part of the technical norms. Because in the end, we have to remember that transport planning does not occur in isolation, and changing something in the system will have different impacts of benefits, and these will be distributed differently among people. So, thanks for listening.